Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I am Michael Bull. This segment is brought to you by Real Crowd, crowdfunding with the professionals. Visit realcrowd.com. Today we're talking about office tenant strategies. I think a very important topic today because office use has kind of been changing over the years and seems to be still in a state of flux. Please welcome my next guest is Bob Chodos, and Bob is Vice Chairman with Newmark Knight Frank, and his office is in Chicago. Bob, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be part of it.
Well, Bob, you've been doing this for 35 years, and so I've had you on the show several times, and I appreciate the insight. And I think, tenant corporate environments seem to be changing, don't they? What do you see changing in your world from your desk when you're dealing with these tenants today? Are there spaces changing? Are there needs changes? Are there concerns changing?
I think the answer to those questions is yes to all. The workplace has become a very dynamic environment today, and number 1, 2, and 3 drivers are access to labor, more access to labor, and access to smarter labor. And that's what we're seeing today. And to attract the kinds of workers that companies need today, they need to provide sort of compelling workplaces that not only create an environment where people want to be there, but that has the technology overlay and the equipment and systems that help them be far more productive. So in the workplace today, we're seeing corporations, professional service companies, partnerships, all deploying very high-end design and very high-end technology-enabled workplaces to attract and retain their key commodity, which is their employees.
Yeah. So when you list the order of importance, or you ask a tenant to list the order of importance to their next space. So recruiting, retention, that labor part of their business is usually right at the top.
That's today. There's just an absolute hunt for talent in our marketplace in specific. Chicago is the central hub of a 5-state region that within a 200-mile radius is graduating 122,000 students a year, 12,000 MBAs from some of the very top business schools in the country, like University of Chicago Booth or Northwestern or Kellogg School at Northwestern, by way of example. So companies that are here thriving are seeking that talent, and a lot of engineering talent as well coming out of schools like Michigan State or Michigan and Purdue, Notre Dame. And so I think today it continues to be a war for talent, and to capture and retain that talent and is a top topic of all CRE executives at every big corporation and every C-suite officer, frankly, we see as well.
What are some examples, Bob, that you're seeing in some of these spaces that might be unique in that regard?
It's interesting. McDonald's just moved in from Oak Brook to the city from a campus where they had their Hamburger University and their entire corporate operation house in a very beautiful, idyllic suburban setting. But in order to access the talent that they were looking to achieve, they ultimately made a decision to move into the city and anchor actually a building that they totally occupy. And it's very unique. It's a kind of a free address system. It's unassigned seating virtually throughout the facility. The CEO and C-suite officers sit in open plan stations, a lot of benching, a tremendous amount of technology to allow people in that space to work anytime, anywhere, in any seat inside the entire envelope. And they have test kitchens, and they have food services and balconies and workout facilities and concierge services that are almost like a hotel experience. When you walk in, it's a completely different feel than what you have seen historically in corporate headquarters. And I think that concept of the concierge feel, the ability to take care of all the things you need to do during the day, including your work, is dealt with in a facility like that. And we've seen similar facilities being built for Google. They're doubling their footprint in Chicago. So is Facebook, and so is Salesforce. So we see very innovative, very technology-enabled space happening in our market. And the trade-off is densities. Densities are going way up. We're seeing some firms that are deploying people at 100 to 125 square feet per desk seat that is going to be utilized, and that's just the actual square footage allocation before they lever it with unassigned seating or hoteling strategies.
Wow, that's amazing. And these tenants that you talked about, these technology and social media type tenants, and McDonald's as well, that was looking for something creative, something that would grab the attention for recruiting and retention. Are they gravitating towards more of the older, unique, historic type buildings, or gravitating more towards tall glass?
It goes across the board. Facebook is going into a new glass tower. Salesforce is rumored to be close to anchoring a new 60 or 57-story tower that could come up in the city. I won't say where because it hasn't happened yet. But we're also seeing a lot of firms going into what's called the West Side Fulton Market corridor, where the McDonald's building, by way of example, is a ground-up new development, but it looks like and feels like a loft building that was built at the turn of the century. And Google's headquarters was a conversion of a cold storage warehouse into an office building with a new building built around it, essentially, to get sort of the best of both worlds, old and new. But all the buildings on the near west side tend to look like and feel like loft buildings, whereas down in the core you get the standard, more vertical glass enclosed box towers.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, building a new building around an old one. And Bob, when these companies come in and they're such dense environment, and you mentioned down to 125 square feet per employee, and that's before you do the shared desk. So are any of them concerned with wellness and productivity of having people that close? And then as the job environment continues to be so strong, are some of these employees like, hey, I can't move my elbows, maybe I should look at a company that gives me more room?
That's a great question, and wellness is a top priority in the whole vocabulary of recruiting, because today people are very concerned with how they live, what they eat, the exercise they get, and so that has to be taken into consideration in these new facilities. I'll say that one of the most interesting trends is that for every seat that a company creates, they tend to create a collaboration seat, and that's a seat in some other location within the facility, whether it's a 4-person or 6-person huddle room, whether it's a work cafe that can seat 150 to 200 people for meals and double as a working space during the day, whether it's a conference facility that has conference rooms for 6, 8, 10, 12, 20, 40 people, training rooms. The ratio tends to be a 1-to-1 ratio of seats designed for people to be assigned to at any given time during a day, and seats that those people can go to collaborate, get away, make quiet calls. We see the deployment in lots of spaces today of 2-person calling or meeting rooms where it's a sound attenuated or soundproof structure where they can go in and get quiet time to make a call or do heads down work where they can't deal with all the noise. So there's a lot of trade-offs happening for that compression. So you have to make sure when you're planning these kinds of facilities that you give people a place that they can get away to, because it is dense when you're benched at 60 or 70 square feet per seat. Yeah, I can imagine. And I guess most all of these tenants are really using the technology to find out, which spaces are open and that sort of thing. Yeah, they have whole naming characteristics and mapping and badging systems so that you know where conference facilities are, and that you can make room reservations literally at the front door with a Crestron or some other kind of mobile device attached to the wall that shows you if it's available, you can book it. If you've booked it and it's available, it'll show red and for 15 minutes, and if you don't sit in the room, it'll go back to green and make it available. So the technology that drives all this ability to seat people in lots of different places at any given point in time becomes the mainstay of what makes these kinds of new spaces function properly.
Yeah.
And it's also about untethering the workers from the telephone and their hardwired connections for their laptops and desktops.
Right. And I guess with some of this technology too, you can actually see where an employee is in the space. Since he doesn't have an assigned desk, you might need to find someone, right?
Big Brother's watching, no doubt about it. It's one of the good. There's the good and the bad. I mean, with all of this technology, people know virtually where you are, when you are there, how long you were there, what you were doing. So, there's the downside of this kind of living in a technology-enabled workplace, but the upside created in productivity and the key attribute of retaining your workforce is worth the investment many companies are finding.
Yeah. The C-suite, the leaders of the companies that you're working with, are you finding that they are trying to attract some of those employees that maybe worked at home, worked out of office, and trying to build an environment where they want to work in the office?
For sure. I mean, that's the name of the game. But at the same time, those C-suite officers are cognizant of the fact that people want to not have to live through 2-hour commute times or hour-and-a-half commute times. And so they're giving people the rights to work remotely, and they realize that certain generational groups tend to work at different times. There's people that like to work late in the afternoon and into the evening, and people who like to work early in the morning and get out early and get home, or work from home a day or two a week. And so I think the companies that we work for, that we see, are adapting to that and are encouraging that in many instances because it helps them deploy more people in less real estate and make people happier with their work-life balance. As long as they're productive, that's what they care about. And so they're giving people the tools to be productive and be remote. And remote isn't just being remote from your station sitting in an office. You can be remote within the headquarters facility or the office facility, or remote at a client, or remote on vacation, or remote at home.
Right.
That's the way companies are thinking today.
Right. And you're saying that some people groups may work better in the afternoon, and some may be more in the morning. And but what do you do with these employees that just don't like to work at any time?
Then you got a problem with that employee. I mean, the expectation today is if you're given the tools and you're given the access, and you have a compelling job to do, they expect you to do it.
That's right.
So the tools that they're deploying today help people get their job done and live their lives hopefully better. And that's what it's really all about, is the workforce of the future is going to be a much more mobile workforce. And by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean it's just young people.
Yeah, right.
I'm a boomer, actually, at the back end of my boomer career, and I use all these tools, and I feel really excited about it because it gives me the ability to work anytime, anywhere I want, and do other things while I'm working.
Yeah. Well, I want to work on a bench next to you just so I can hear you work. I want to have 35 years experience. So, Bob,
what you wish for.
So, Bob, what would you leave our audience with, maybe for a C-suite, a corporate user, a leader of a company to think about in their space design and in the process?
Well, that's a really great question. I think it boils back to that real estate and the technology that sits in the real estate is an envelope that gets around the culture of the business you're trying to build and the behaviors you're trying to get your employees to work with and to continue to build upon. And so we tell our companies, first thing is let's do a more in-depth dive around workplace strategy about what it is you're trying to achieve and what kind of change you're looking to pursue, and then customize a real estate business solution that delivers those behavioral changes, and hopefully that means more profit for the organization, because that's what businesses are about. They're about making profit. They're about building products, and it's the people and process that gets that job done. And so we see forward-leaning executives today really spending time on culture and change management, and then positioning real estate to achieve those objectives that they identify as profit-making behaviors.
Well said, and great advice as usual, Bob. Thank you for joining us, sir.
You bet, Michael, anytime.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us around the country or around the world. We appreciate you sharing the show and commenting. And do let us know what you think. What do you think are some of the trends that are in the future for office users in the U.S. or anywhere in the world? And thanks for joining us. Until next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh. And join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show.